The steady patter of rain against my windshield matched the erratic rhythm of my heart as I pulled into the gas station. Cincinnati's gloomy weather seemed to mirror my mood, a cocktail of frustration and exhaustion after a grueling day of staring at computer screens, debugging lines of code that refused to cooperate. As a web designer, I was used to solving problems, but today had pushed me to my limits. I stepped out of my car, the cool droplets instantly dotting my blonde hair. The neon lights of the gas station flickered, casting an eerie glow on the wet pavement. I approached the pump, my green eyes narrowing as I inserted my card. Nothing. I tried again. Still nothing. A groan of exasperation escaped my lips as I futilely jabbed at the unresponsive buttons. "Come on, you piece of junk," I muttered, my patience wearing thin. I was about to give up and drive to another station when a voice behind me made me jump. "Need a hand?" I turned, ready to politely decline, but the words caught in my throat. Standing before me was a woman who seemed to defy the dreary surroundings. Her chestnut hair cascaded over her shoulders in perfect waves, framing a face that could grace magazine covers. But it was her eyes that truly captivated me, a mesmerizing shade of blue that reminded me of the ocean on a clear day. Yes, please," I stammered, suddenly feeling self-conscious about my rain-dampened appearance. "The pump seems to be malfunctioning." She stepped closer, a small smile playing on her lips. "Let me take a look. These old pumps can be temperamental sometimes." As she worked her magic on the stubborn machine, I couldn't help but notice the graceful way she moved, her slender fingers deftly manipulating the keypad. There was something about her presence that made the rainy evening feel a little less gloomy. "There we go," she announced triumphantly as the pump whirred to life. "Just needed a firm touch." Our eyes met, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. There was a connection, an inexplicable spark that made my breath catch. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Michelle, by the way." "Jacqueline," she replied, her smile widening. "Nice to meet you, Michelle." As I filled up my tank, we chatted easily, discovering we both worked in the heart of Cincinnati. Jacqueline, I learned, was a beauty therapist with her own small salon. The way her eyes lit up when she talked about her work was captivating. Before I knew it, my tank was full, and our conversation had to come to an end. But I wasn't ready to say goodbye. In a moment of uncharacteristic boldness, I heard myself say, "Would you like to grab a coffee sometime?" To properly thank you for your help. Jacqueline's blue eyes sparkled with amusement and something else I couldn't quite place. "I'd love that," she replied, her voice warm and inviting. We exchanged numbers, and as I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that this chance encounter was the beginning of something significant. The rain had lessened to a gentle drizzle, and for the first time that day I found myself smiling. Little did I know that this seemingly ordinary Tuesday evening at a gas station would be the catalyst for a journey that would change my life forever. A journey of self-discovery, passion, and unexpected truths that would challenge everything I thought I knew about myself and my past. As I navigated the rain-slicked streets of Cincinnati, my mind kept drifting back to Jacqueline's smile, the warmth in her eyes, and the inexplicable connection I felt. I couldn't wait to see her again, to explore this new and exciting feeling blossoming in my chest. But I also couldn't have imagined the roller coaster of emotions and revelations that awaited me, all set in motion by a faulty gas pump and a rainy night in Cincinnati. The cafe buzzed with the gentle hum of conversation and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. I sat at a corner table, my fingers nervously tapping against my mug as I watched the door. It had been 3 days since my chance encounter with Jacqueline at the gas station, and the anticipation of seeing her again had my stomach in knots. When she walked in, the world seemed to slow down. Jacqueline's presence commanded attention without effort, her graceful movements drawing my gaze like a magnet. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a loose bun, accentuating her delicate features and those captivating blue eyes that had haunted my dreams. "Michelle," she said, her voice warm and rich as she approached. "It's wonderful to see you again. I stood, awkwardly unsure whether to hug her or shake her hand. Jacqueline solved my dilemma by leaning in and placing a soft kiss on my cheek. The scent of her perfume, a subtle mix of jasmine and vanilla, enveloped me. As we settled into our seats, the initial nervousness melted away, replaced by an easy rapport that felt as natural as breathing. We talked about our work, our dreams, and our lives in Cincinnati. I found myself captivated by the way Jacqueline's eyes crinkled when she laughed, the elegant gestures of her hands as she spoke, and the depth of passion in her voice when she described her work as a beauty therapist. I love helping people feel confident in their own skin, she explained, her eyes shining. There's something magical about watching someone's face light up when they see themselves in a new way. I nodded, understanding all too well the power of transformation. As a web designer, I often saw the joy in my clients' eyes when their vision came to life on screen. It's like you're not just changing their appearance, but their whole outlook, I mused. Jacqueline's hand brushed mine as she reached for her coffee cup, sending a jolt of electricity through my body. Our eyes met, and for a moment, the bustling cafe faded away. There was an unspoken understanding, a connection that transcended words. As our coffee date drew to a close, neither of us seemed eager to part ways. We lingered outside the cafe, our conversation flowing as easily as it had inside. The setting sun painted the Cincinnati skyline in hues of gold and pink, casting a warm glow on Jacqueline's face. I had a wonderful time, Michelle, Jacqueline said softly. I'd love to see you again. My heart soared at her words. Me too, I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice despite the butterflies in my stomach. As we prepared to go our separate ways, Jacqueline gently placed her hand on my lower back, guiding me around a group of tourists on the sidewalk. The touch was innocent, yet it left a trail of fire on my skin. I could feel the warmth of her hand through my blouse, and it took all my willpower not to lean into her touch. That night, as I lay in bed, my mind replayed every moment of our encounter. The way Jacqueline's eyes sparkled when she laughed, the gentle touch of her hand, the intoxicating scent of her perfume. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt this way about anyone, let alone another woman. The realization both thrilled and terrified me. Over the next few weeks, Jacqueline and I grew closer. Our coffee dates became dinner dates, long walks in the park, and quiet evenings watching old movies. With each meeting, the attraction between us grew stronger, an undeniable force pulling us together. It was during one of these quiet evenings that everything changed. We were at my apartment, a half-empty bottle of wine on the coffee table, the credits of a classic film rolling on the TV. Jacqueline turned to me, her blue eyes dark with an emotion I had seen growing there for weeks. Michelle, she whispered, her hand cupping my cheek. I can't pretend anymore. I have feelings for you. My heart raced as I leaned into her touch. I have feelings for you too, I admitted, my voice barely audible. The kiss that followed was soft, tentative at first, then growing in intensity. Jacqueline's lips were impossibly soft, tasting of wine and promise. My hands found their way into her hair, pulling her closer as years of suppressed desires came rushing to the surface. We moved to the bedroom, our touches growing more urgent, more exploratory. I marveled at the softness of Jacqueline's skin as I slowly removed her delicate floral-patterned silk lingerie. Each kiss, each caress was a revelation, awakening parts of me I never knew existed. In the afterglow, as we lay tangled in sheets in each other's arms, I felt a sense of completeness I had never experienced before. Jacqueline traced lazy patterns on my skin, her touch both soothing and electrifying. You're beautiful, she murmured, placing a soft kiss on my shoulder. As I drifted off to sleep, I knew that my life had irrevocably changed. What had started as a chance encounter at a gas station had blossomed into something profound and beautiful. Little did I know that this newfound happiness would soon be tested by revelations from my past, threatening to unravel the delicate threads of love we had begun to weave. The warm glow of candlelight flickered across the dining room, casting long shadows that danced on the walls. I sat at the table, surrounded by the comforting familiarity of my childhood home, yet feeling strangely out of place. My parents, John and Sarah, exchanged glances that spoke volumes, their forced smiles barely masking an underlying tension. "So Michelle," my mother began, her voice overly cheerful, "how's work been? Any exciting new projects?" I launched into a description of my latest web design gig, but my mind was elsewhere. Jacqueline's soft laugh echoed in my memory, the ghost of her touch lingering on my skin. We'd been seeing each other for a few months now, and I was falling hard. But I hadn't told my parents yet. The weight of this secret pressed heavily on my chest, making each bite of pot roast feel like a struggle. As the dinner progressed, I noticed my parents' whispered exchanges, the way they'd abruptly stop talking when I looked their way. Something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. It wasn't until after dessert, as I was helping my mother clear the table, that I overheard a snippet of conversation that made my blood run cold. "We can't keep this from her forever, Sarah," my father's hushed voice carried from the living room. "She deserves to know the truth about her adoption." The plate I was holding slipped from my suddenly numb fingers, shattering on the kitchen floor. The crash brought my parents running, their faces pale with the realization that I'd heard. "Michelle, honey," my mother started, reaching for me, but I stepped back, my mind reeling. "What truth?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "What do you mean, adoption?" The silence that followed was deafening. My father sighed heavily, running a hand through his graying hair. "We should sit down for this," he said quietly. Back in the dining room, the candles still burning, my world tilted on its axis. My parents, the two people I thought I knew better than anyone, revealed a truth that shattered my sense of identity. "We adopted you when you were just a baby," my mother explained, tears glistening in her eyes. "We loved you from the moment we saw you, Michelle. You've always been our daughter in every way that matters." Questions flooded my mind, each one more painful than the last. Why hadn't they told me sooner? Who were my birth parents? Why was I given up for adoption? But my parents had few answers. They knew little about my biological family, only that the adoption had been closed at the birth mother's request. I left my parents' house that night in a daze, driving aimlessly through the rain-slicked streets of Cincinnati. My entire past felt like a lie, my future uncertain. Without conscious thought, I found myself outside Jacqueline's apartment building. She opened the door, taking in my tear-stained face and trembling hands. Without a word, she pulled me into her arms, her embrace a sanctuary from the storm raging inside me. "I don't know who I am anymore," I whispered into her shoulder, my voice breaking. Jacqueline led me to the couch, her hand never leaving mine. "You're Michelle," she said softly, her blue eyes filled with warmth and understanding. "You're the woman I'm falling in love with, the talented web designer who can make magic with code, the person who always remembers to water my plants when I'm away. That hasn't changed." Her words were a balm to my battered soul. As I poured out the whole story, Jacqueline listened without judgment, offering comfort and strength. When I finished, emotionally drained, she pulled me close. "We'll figure this out together," she promised, pressing a gentle kiss to my forehead. "Whatever you want to do, search for your birth parents or not, I'm here for you." That night, as we lay tangled in Jacqueline's sheets, I found solace in her arms. Her gentle caresses and whispered words of comfort anchored me, reminding me that while my past might be uncertain, my present was filled with love. But even as I drifted off to sleep, questions nagged at the edges of my mind. Who were my birth parents? Why had they given me up? And how would the answers to these questions change the person I thought I was? As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I made a decision. I would uncover the truth about my past, no matter where it led. With Jacqueline by my side, I felt strong enough to face whatever lay ahead. Little did I know that this decision would set in motion a chain of events that would test not only my newfound relationship with Jacqueline but also challenge everything I thought I knew about family, identity, and love. The journey ahead would be fraught with unexpected twists and painful revelations, but it would also lead to a deeper understanding of myself and the true meaning of family. As I snuggled closer to Jacqueline, her steady heartbeat a comforting rhythm against my ear, I steeled myself for the challenges ahead. The search for my origins would begin tomorrow, but for now, I allowed myself to be held, finding strength in the arms of the woman who had unexpectedly become my anchor in this storm of uncertainty. The soft glow of my laptop screen illuminated the dim room, casting shadows across the piles of papers strewn about. I'd been at it for hours, scouring adoption records and online databases, chasing any lead that might shed light on my origins. Jacqueline sat beside me, her presence a comforting anchor in the storm of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. "Look at this," I murmured, pointing to a document I'd uncovered. "It's a redacted birth certificate. The names are blacked out, but the date and place match what my parents told me." Jacqueline leaned closer, her chestnut hair brushing my shoulder. The familiar scent of her perfume momentarily distracted me from the task at hand. "It's a start," she said encouragingly, her blue eyes meeting mine. "What's our next move?" I ran a hand through my blonde hair, frustration evident in the gesture. "I don't know. These records are like a maze, and I feel like I'm hitting dead ends at every turn." Jacqueline's hand found mine, her touch grounding me. "We'll figure it out, Michelle. I'm here for you, every step of the way." Her unwavering support had been my lifeline these past weeks. As I delved deeper into the mystery of my adoption, Jacqueline had been there, offering comfort during late-night research sessions, and providing a shoulder to cry on when the emotional toll became too much. Days turned into weeks as we pursued every possible lead. We visited courthouses, pored over microfiche records, and even hired a private investigator. Each small discovery felt like a victory, but the big picture remained frustratingly elusive. It was during one of our marathon research sessions that a notification pinged on my laptop. I'd submitted a DNA test weeks ago, more out of desperation than hope. Now, the results were in. With trembling fingers, I clicked the link. Jacqueline's arm wrapped around my shoulders as we both leaned in to read the screen. What we saw made my breath catch in my throat. "Oh my God," I whispered, my eyes wide with disbelief. The test had revealed a close genetic match, a first cousin, linked to one of Cincinnati's most prominent families, the Harrisons. My mind reeled with the implications. Could I be related to the Harrisons? The same Harrisons whose name graced buildings and charitable foundations across the city? Jacqueline squeezed my hand. "This is huge, Michelle. How do you want to handle this?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. I need to confront them. I need answers. The next few days were a blur of preparation and anxiety. With Jacqueline's help, I managed to secure a meeting with Elizabeth Harrison, the matriarch of the family. As we stood outside the imposing Harrison mansion, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. "Remember," Jacqueline said softly, cupping my face in her hands, "no matter what happens in there, you are loved. Your parents love you, and I love you." Her words, and the gentle kiss that followed, gave me the courage to ring the doorbell. Elizabeth Harrison was a formidable woman in her 60s, with steel-gray hair and piercing green eyes that seemed to look right through me. As we sat in her opulent study, I laid out the results of my DNA test and the little I knew about my adoption. The silence that followed my explanation seemed to stretch for an eternity. When Elizabeth finally spoke, her voice was tight with emotion. "I never thought this day would come," she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. What followed was a tale of family secrets, forbidden love, and heart-wrenching choices. My birth mother, it turned out, was Elizabeth's niece, a young woman who had found herself pregnant and unmarried in a time and social circle that wouldn't accept such a scandal. "Your mother wanted to keep you," Elizabeth explained, her voice soft with regret. "But the family, we made decisions we thought were for the best. We were wrong." As the full story unfolded, I felt a whirlwind of emotions, anger at the choices made for me, sadness for the mother I never knew, and a strange sense of relief at finally knowing the truth. When we left the Harrison mansion hours later, my head was spinning. Jacqueline drove us home in silence, occasionally reaching over to squeeze my hand reassuringly. Back in my apartment, as the weight of all I'd learned settled over me, I finally broke down. Jacqueline held me as I sobbed, her presence a balm to my battered emotions. "What do I do now?" I asked, my voice muffled against her shoulder. Jacqueline pulled back slightly, her blue eyes meeting mine. "You take it one day at a time, you process this information and you decide what it means for you. And remember, you're not alone in this." As I lay in bed that night, Jacqueline's steady breathing beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I had answers now, but they had only led to more questions. Who was I in light of this new information? How did it change my relationships? With my adoptive parents, with the Harrisons, with myself. One thing was certain, the journey I had begun was far from over. As I drifted off to sleep, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them with Jacqueline by my side. The search for my past had led me to unexpected places, but it had also confirmed the strength of the love I had found in the present. The gentle hum of my laptop fan filled the apartment as I stared at the screen, my eyes burning from hours of research. The soft orange glow of sunset filtered through the blinds, painting the room in warm hues that contrasted sharply with the turmoil in my heart. I had spent weeks digging into my newfound family history, trying to reconcile the person I thought I was with this new identity thrust upon me. A gentle hand on my shoulder startled me from my thoughts. Jacqueline stood behind me, concern etched on her beautiful face. "Michelle, you need to take a break," she said softly, her blue eyes filled with worry. I leaned back, allowing myself to relax into her touch. "I know, I feel like I'm so close to understanding it all." Jacqueline's fingers worked their magic on my tense muscles. "You can't force it all to make sense overnight. Give yourself time." As I turned to face her, ready to argue, I noticed an unfamiliar tension in her posture. "What's wrong?" I asked, suddenly alert. Jacqueline hesitated, biting her lower lip in a way that usually I found endearing, but now filled me with dread. I got a job offer," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. My heart sank. "That's great news, isn't it? Where's the job?" "Los Angeles," she replied, her eyes searching mine for a reaction. The word hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Los Angeles, across the country. Away from Cincinnati, away from me, away from everything we had built together. "When do you have to decide?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "By the end of the week," Jacqueline said, her hand reaching for mine. "It's an amazing opportunity, Michelle. A chance to work with some of the top names in the beauty industry." I nodded, unable to trust my voice. I knew how much this meant to her, how hard she had worked for an opportunity like this. But the thought of her leaving, especially now when my world was already in upheaval, was almost unbearable. The next few days passed in a haze of conflicting emotions. We tried to carry on as normal, but the impending decision loomed over us like a storm cloud. I threw myself into my research with renewed vigor, as if unlocking the secrets of my past could somehow provide clarity for our future. On the night before Jacqueline's deadline, I planned a romantic evening at home. As she walked through the door, her eyes widened at the sight of candles flickering throughout the apartment, the aroma of her favorite meal wafting from the kitchen. "Michelle," she breathed, her eyes glistening. "What's all this?" I took her hand, leading her to the table. "I wanted to remind you of what we have here," I said softly. "Whatever you decide, I want you to know how much you mean to me." Dinner was a bittersweet affair, filled with meaningful glances and lingering touches. As we finished our meal, I stood, pulling Jacqueline to her feet. Without a word, I led her to the bedroom. In the soft glow of candlelight, we slowly undressed each other, each touch reverent and filled with unspoken emotion. I marveled at the smoothness of her skin, the gentle curves of her body. My fingers trembled as I unhooked her bra, revealing the beauty that had captivated me from the start. Our kisses deepened, hands exploring familiar territory with renewed appreciation. Every caress, every sigh felt magnified, as if we were trying to memorize each other. I trailed kisses down Jacqueline's neck, reveling in the soft sounds of pleasure she made. As we made love, it felt different from before, more intense, more desperate. There was an urgency in our movements, a need to connect on the deepest level possible. I lost myself in the sensation of her body against mine, the taste of her lips, the sound of her breathless moans. In the aftermath, we lay tangled in sheets in each other's arms, a comfortable silence enveloping us. Jacqueline's fingers traced lazy patterns on my skin, sending shivers down my spine. "I love you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "No matter what happens, I need you to know that." I pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I love you too," I replied, my own voice wavering. "We'll figure this out, whatever you decide." As we drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The search for my past had led me to Jacqueline, but now it threatened to tear us apart. I clung to her, savoring the warmth of her body against mine, trying to push away the fear of waking up to an empty bed. In the quiet of the night, with Jacqueline's steady breathing beside me, I made a silent promise to myself. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever distance might separate us, I would fight for this love. Because in Jacqueline, I had found not just a partner, but a home. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the empty space beside me. Jacqueline had left for work early, the weight of her impending decision hanging heavily in the air. I sat up, running a hand through my tangled blonde hair, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. Today was the day I would finally meet my birth mother. After weeks of correspondence and hesitation on both sides, we had agreed to meet at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of Cincinnati. As I dressed, my hands trembling slightly, I couldn't help but wonder how this encounter would change my life yet again. The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived. I spotted her immediately, a woman in her early 50s with familiar green eyes and a nervous smile. As I approached, she stood, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Michelle," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "you look so much like you," I finished, a lump forming in my throat. What followed was a conversation filled with tears, explanations, and long-buried truths. She told me of her youth, of the pressure from her family, of the heart-wrenching decision to give me up. With each word, the pieces of my past began to fall into place. "I've regretted it every day since," she admitted, her eyes glistening. "But seeing the woman you've become, I know you had a good life, a loving family." As we talked, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The anger and confusion I had carried for weeks began to dissipate, replaced by understanding and, surprisingly, a sense of peace. "I don't expect to replace your parents," she said, as our meeting drew to a close. "But I hope we can have a place in each other's lives." I nodded, a small smile tugging at my lips. "I'd like that." As I left the cafe, my phone buzzed with a message from Jacqueline. "Made my decision. Meet me at the airport." My heart raced as I drove to the airport, a mix of fear and hope coursing through my veins. I found Jacqueline near the departure boards, her suitcase by her side. My stomach dropped at the sight. "You're leaving," I said, my voice breaking. Jacqueline turned, her blue eyes shining with unshed tears. "Michelle, But before she could continue, I closed the distance between us, pulling her into a fierce embrace. "I understand," I whispered. "This is your dream. I won't stand in your way." Jacqueline pulled back, cupping my face in her hands. "You don't understand," she said, a smile breaking through her tears. "I'm not leaving. I turned down the job." I blinked, stunned. "But your career, your daydreams." "My dreams changed the moment I met you," she said softly. "Cincinnati is my home now. You're my home." The relief and joy that flooded through me was overwhelming. Without caring about the curious onlookers, I pulled Jacqueline into a passionate kiss, pouring all my love and gratitude into the gesture. As we broke apart, breathless and laughing, I suddenly knew what I needed to do. "Come on," I said, taking her hand. "There's someone I want you to meet." We drove back to the cafe where my birth mother was still sitting, nursing a cup of coffee. Her eyes widened in surprise as we approached. "Mom," I said, the word feeling strange yet right on my tongue, "this is Jacqueline, the woman I love." As introductions were made and conversation flowed, I felt a sense of completeness I had never experienced before. Here, in this small cafe, my past and my future were converging, creating a present filled with love and possibility. Later that night, as Jacqueline and I lay tangled in each other's arms, I marveled at the journey that had brought us to this moment. What had started as a chance encounter at a gas station had led to a love deeper than I had ever imagined, and a family larger and more complex than I had ever known. "What are you thinking about?" Jacqueline murmured, her fingers tracing lazy patterns on my skin. I smiled, pulling her closer. "I'm thinking that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a broken gas pump and a rainy night in Cincinnati." Jacqueline laughed softly, pressing a kiss to my shoulder. "And sometimes," she added, "they lead you right where you're meant to be." As we drifted off to sleep, I felt a profound sense of peace. The search for my past had led me to a future brighter than I could have imagined. With Jacqueline by my side and a newfound connection to my roots, I was ready to write the next chapter of our story together.